People have always feared places that refuse to follow the rules of the world. Most of those stories fade into legend. A few survive because nobody can explain them. Black Hollow Forest was one of those places. The forest sat far from the nearest town. It looked ordinary on satellite images. Tall pine trees covered the hills. A narrow dirt road led to an old wooden bridge. Beyond that bridge, everything became uncertain. For nearly 100 years, people reported impossible events there. Hunters lost entire days without realizing it. Campers claimed they heard conversations from people who were never there. Rescue teams followed fresh footprints that suddenly ended in the middle of empty ground. Official reports blamed bad weather, poor navigation, and panic. Local residents blamed something else. They simply called it the place where time never came back. Most people laughed at the story, until people began disappearing. Some vanished while walking only a few hundred meters into the trees. Others disappeared with modern GPS equipment and emergency radios. Search helicopters found nothing. Dogs lost every scent at the same location near the bridge. Eventually, authorities stopped organizing large searches. The forest became a place everyone avoided. Years passed. The mystery remained untouched. That changed when documentary producer Daniel Carter decided to investigate the legend himself. Daniel had spent years exposing fake ghost stories and internet myths. He believed every mystery had a logical explanation: hidden caves, criminal activity, faulty memories. There was always an answer. He gathered a small production team. Emma handled cameras. Ryan operated drones and mapping equipment. Sophia specialized in historical research. Mark worked as the sound engineer. Their goal seemed simple: spend 3 days inside Black Hollow Forest. Document everything. Return with evidence. On a cold autumn morning, they reached the old bridge. The bridge looked older than expected. Its wooden boards creaked beneath every step. No warning signs stood nearby. No fences blocked the entrance. Only silence. Daniel checked his wristwatch. 10:17 a.m. Emma adjusted her camera settings. Ryan launched the first drone. Sophia compared their location with old maps. Everything appeared normal. Daniel smiled. This will probably be another forgotten local legend. The team crossed the bridge. The moment every person stepped onto the opposite side, something happened. Daniel looked at his watch. The second hand had stopped moving. Emma frowned. My camera clock just froze. Ryan pulled out his phone. No signal. Mark tapped his digital recorder. It stopped counting. Sophia slowly looked around. Everyone check your watches. Every clock displayed exactly the same time. 10:23, not 1 second more, not 1 second less. Daniel reset his watch. Nothing changed. Ryan restarted his phone. The screen worked normally. Only the time refused to move. The drone flying overhead suddenly drifted sideways. Its live video filled with static. Then the screen turned black. Connection lost. Ryan stared into the sky. I can still hear it. Everyone listened. The drone's propellers buzzed somewhere above the trees. But nobody could see it. It was as if something invisible had swallowed it. Daniel told everyone to remain calm. Mechanical failures happened. GPS failures happened. Equipment sometimes malfunctioned in remote areas. There had to be an explanation. They continued walking. The forest became strangely quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind. Only their footsteps echoed between the trees. Emma slowly lifted her camera. Far ahead, between two enormous pine trees, someone appeared to be standing perfectly still, a tall figure, too far away to identify. Daniel raised binoculars. The figure disappeared. Nobody had moved. It was simply gone. Emma replayed her footage. The figure was visible for only 3 frames, then empty forest. Ryan whispered, I thought nobody came here. Nobody answered. The silence somehow felt heavier than before. Daniel looked once more at his frozen watch. 10:23. Exactly the same. He forced a nervous smile. If this is someone's prank. His voice faded, because somewhere deep inside the forest, a church bell rang. Slowly. 1, 2, 3. There had never been a church marked anywhere inside Black Hollow Forest. And yet, the sound was getting closer. The bell rang a 4th time. Then it stopped. Silence settled over the trees once again. No echo. No birds. No wind. Daniel looked toward the direction of the sound. We're going to find that church. Ryan checked the GPS tablet. The screen still displayed their location, but something was wrong. The blue marker moved in circles, even though they were standing still. Emma filmed the display. The coordinates changed every few seconds. Sophia unfolded a paper map. According to the map, they were standing on a straight trail leading north, but the compass pointed east. Mark held up a second compass. It pointed west. None of the instruments agreed. Daniel took a deep breath. Forget the electronics. We follow the trail. The path narrowed as the trees grew taller. The sunlight faded beneath the thick canopy. After nearly an hour of walking, the forest suddenly opened into a clearing. Everyone stopped. An old village stood before them. Small wooden cottages lined a single dirt road. A stone well sat in the center. An abandoned schoolhouse leaned slightly to one side. Everything looked untouched. There were no broken windows, no collapsed roofs, no signs of fire. It looked as though the people had simply walked away. Emma whispered, "This place isn't on any map." Sophia nodded. "I've studied every historical record of this region. There shouldn't be a village here." Daniel approached the nearest house. The front door stood open. Inside, dust covered every surface. A table remained set for dinner. 4 plates, 4 cups, 4 wooden chairs. One chair lay on its side, as if someone had stood up in a hurry. The fireplace was cold, but strangely, there were no cobwebs, no insects, no smell of decay. Time itself seemed unwilling to touch the place. Emma noticed a family photograph hanging on the wall. The faces had faded. Only the forest behind them remained perfectly clear. Mark found an old calendar. October 1963. The pages had never been turned. Sophia carefully searched the shelves. She found a leather-bound town register. The first pages listed births, marriages, harvest records. Then the entries suddenly stopped. The final page contained only one sentence. "Do not stay after sunset." Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Outside, Ryan called for everyone. "You need to see this." He stood beside an old wooden sign at the edge of the village. Most of the paint had peeled away. Only a few letters remained. Alo, Idge. The village name had been deliberately scratched away. Someone had wanted it forgotten. Sophia compared the sign with photographs from old archives. She frowned. This village existed. Daniel looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I found tax records mentioning a settlement here, but every official map after 1963 removed it completely, as if it had never existed." Daniel felt a chill. Why erase an entire village? Before Sophia could answer, a voice spoke behind them. "You should have turned back." Everyone spun around. An elderly man stood at the edge of the clearing. He carried a worn lantern. His clothes looked decades out of date. His face was pale. His eyes never blinked. Daniel stepped forward. "Sir, do you live here?" The old man ignored the question. Instead, he looked at each member of the team, one by one. Then he said quietly, "Your clocks have stopped." Nobody had told him about the clocks. Daniel froze. "How do you know that?" The old man looked toward the dark forest. "Because everyone who crosses the bridge loses time." Ryan asked, "Who are you?" The man remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he answered, "I was the last person who tried to leave." No one spoke. The old man slowly raised his lantern. Its flame burned with an unnatural blue light. He pointed toward the forest behind the village. "You still have daylight. But when the sun disappears," his voice became almost a whisper, "the forest starts looking for people." Without another word, he turned and walked into the trees. Daniel rushed after him. Only a few seconds had passed, but the old man was gone. No footsteps, no broken branches, no sound. Only the lantern's blue glow, fading deeper into the darkness. Daniel stood at the edge of the trees, staring into the darkness where the blue lantern had vanished. There was nowhere for the old man to disappear. The ground was covered with damp leaves. There were no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. Emma replayed the camera footage. The old man appeared clearly as he walked away. Then, without warning, the image distorted. For less than a second, the path behind him was completely empty. The next frame showed him several meters farther ahead, as if time itself had skipped. Ryan frowned. "That isn't a camera glitch." Mark checked the audio recorder. The man's footsteps were missing. Only the team's footsteps could be heard. Sophia closed the village register. "I don't think he was trying to scare us. I think he was warning us." Daniel looked at the sky. The afternoon light was fading faster than it should have. It can't be this late already. Ryan checked the frozen clock again. Still, 10:23. The sun had clearly moved, but their clocks had not. Daniel made a decision. We'll camp here tonight. No, Sophia answered immediately. Not inside the village. Daniel looked at her. The warning said not to stay after sunset. It didn't say where. An uneasy silence followed. Eventually, they chose a clearing several hundred meters beyond the village. It looked like an ordinary campsite, until they arrived. 5 old tents stood beneath the trees. Every one of them was intact. Their fabric was faded, but undamaged. Cooking equipment remained neatly arranged around a stone fire pit. Metal mugs sat beside sleeping bags. It looked as though the campers had gone for a short walk and never returned. Emma slowly entered the largest tent. A backpack rested against the wall. Inside were fresh clothes, a flashlight, a wallet. The driver's license belonged to a man named Michael Evans, missing 41 years earlier. Sophia remembered the name immediately. He disappeared during a university expedition. They searched for him for 6 months. Daniel looked around the camp. It hasn't aged. Ryan knelt beside the fire pit. He held his hand over the ashes. His expression changed instantly. They're warm. Nobody believed him. Then everyone reached toward the ashes. Heat. Real heat. As though someone had extinguished the fire only minutes ago. Mark whispered, "That's impossible." Daniel carefully searched another tent. Inside lay an old journal. The first pages described an ordinary hiking trip. Day 1. Beautiful weather. Day 2. Compasses stopped working. Day 3. Clocks frozen. Everyone exchanged nervous looks. Daniel continued reading. The handwriting grew shakier with each page. We found a village. We met an old man. We hear bells every night. Emma looked up. That's exactly what happened to us. Daniel turned another page. We tried leaving. The bridge keeps moving. Another page. We lost 3 hours. Then, we lost 2 years. Silence. Daniel swallowed hard. The final page contained only one unfinished sentence. If anyone finds this, don't follow the sentence ended there. The pen had dragged across the paper, as though the writer had disappeared in the middle of writing. No farewell, no signature, nothing. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the clearing. For the first time since entering the forest, the trees moved. Their branches creaked together. Mark slowly raised his microphone. Do you hear that? At first, nothing. Then, voices. Very faint, whispering between the trees. Not one voice. Dozens. Too distant to understand. Emma turned toward the sound. Someone's out there. Ryan switched on a flashlight. Its beam reached only a few meters before being swallowed by darkness. The whispers grew louder, not threatening, not angry, desperate, as though many people were trying to speak at once. Daniel called out, "Who's there?" The whispers stopped instantly. Silence. Then, a single voice answered, soft, calm, and impossibly close. "You're camping. In our place." Everyone spun around. The campsite behind them was empty, but one tent had just unzipped itself. From the inside, nobody moved. The zipper slid all the way down, slowly, deliberately. The tent flap opened, just enough for complete darkness to spill out. Ryan aimed his flashlight inside. There was nothing, only an empty sleeping bag, a backpack, and a notebook lying open on the ground. The voice had come from somewhere inside that tent. Daniel stepped forward. "Is someone there?" No answer. He reached inside and picked up the notebook. The paper felt dry. The ink looked fresh. He turned to the last page. There was a new sentence. It had not been there a moment earlier. "Don't answer if they call your name." Emma quickly checked the footage. When Daniel reached into the tent, the notebook had already been closed. Nobody had touched it. Yet now it was open, with new writing. A sharp burst of static suddenly exploded from Mark's radio receiver. Everyone jumped. The radio had been switched off, yet voices crackled through the speaker. "Can anyone hear us?" The signal was weak, broken. A man's voice, terrified. "We've been walking for 3 days. We can't find the bridge." Sophia grabbed the recorder. "Can you identify yourself?" Several seconds passed, then the reply came. "Officer James Walker." Daniel looked at Sophia. The search officer from 1981. Sophia's face turned pale. He disappeared during the rescue mission. The radio hissed again. Another voice replaced the first. A young woman, crying. My watch won't move. It's still morning, Emma whispered. That's exactly what happened to us. The transmission cut out. Only static remained. Then another voice emerged. Older, calm. If you're hearing this, leave before sunset. Ryan stared at the radio. These can't all be live. Sophia opened her research files. Every name they heard appeared in missing person records. Different years, different decades. Yet every voice sounded as if it had been recorded only moments ago. Mark adjusted the frequency. The signal became clearer. Now dozens of conversations overlapped. Children, police officers, scientists, campers, soldiers, all speaking at once, each describing the same impossible forest, each believing help was only minutes away. Daniel realized something horrifying. They're not recordings. They think someone is listening. Emma slowly lowered her camera. What if they're talking to us from different years? Nobody answered, because nobody could prove she was wrong. Then every voice stopped at exactly the same moment. Complete silence. A low mechanical sound replaced it. Click, click, click. Ryan looked around. It sounds like... Daniel finished the sentence. A clock. One clock became 2, then 10, then hundreds, ticking from every direction. Even though every watch they carried remained frozen at 10:23, the ticking grew louder, faster, impossible. As if thousands of unseen clocks surrounded the campsite, Emma covered her ears. It's getting closer. The sound stopped instantly. Without warning, the forest became silent again. Then a child's voice spoke through the radio, soft, almost cheerful. You finally heard us. Daniel leaned toward the speaker. Who are you? The child laughed quietly. You came much earlier than the others. Daniel frowned. What others? The reply came immediately. The people, who haven't arrived yet. Before anyone could ask another question, the radio emitted one long piercing tone. Every flashlight went dark. The camera screens shut off. Even the batteries they had replaced that morning suddenly showed empty. For several seconds, the only light in the entire forest was a faint blue glow, moving slowly between the trees, exactly like the lantern carried by the old man. Except this time, there wasn't just one light. There were dozens. The blue lights drifted silently between the trees. One by one, they moved without shaking, without flickering, too smooth to be carried by people. Emma tried to film them. Her camera powered on for a single second. The screen flashed white, then it died again. Ryan whispered, "They're getting closer." Nobody could hear footsteps, only the faint sound of hundreds of clocks ticking somewhere beyond the darkness. Daniel grabbed a flare from his backpack. He pulled the cord. A burst of red light filled the clearing. The blue lights vanished instantly. The forest became empty again. Not a single movement, not a single sound. Only the dying glow of the flare. Nobody slept that night. They sat together until the first gray light filtered through the trees. As sunrise reached the campsite, every electronic device suddenly came back to life. Flashlights worked. Cameras rebooted. The radio fell silent. Ryan immediately launched a replacement drone. It climbed above the trees. Everyone watched the live feed. The campsite appeared below. The abandoned village stood exactly where they had left it. Then Ryan noticed something strange. There wasn't a trail here yesterday. A narrow path stretched away from the campsite, perfectly straight, perfectly clear. Fresh footprints covered the soil. 5 sets, exactly matching their own boots. Daniel frowned. We never walked there. Sophia replayed yesterday's drone footage. The path didn't exist. Not even a faint outline. The ground had been covered by thick brush. Now it looked decades old, as if thousands of people had walked it. Ryan zoomed the camera farther ahead. The trail disappeared beneath dense fog. The drone continued forward. 30 seconds later, the video froze, then returned. Daniel stared at the screen. That's impossible. The drone had flown less than 1 kilometer, yet the camera showed something that could not exist. An enormous stone lighthouse stood in the middle of the forest. Its white walls were cracked with age. Its lantern room leaned slightly to one side. There was only one problem. The nearest coastline was more than 600 kilometers away. Emma whispered, "Why is there a lighthouse here?" Nobody answered. The drone continued circling. Behind the lighthouse stood rusted railroad tracks. Beyond them, a frozen lake. Then, snow-covered mountains. Landscapes that belonged to completely different parts of the country. None of them could possibly exist in the same place. The video glitched again. The lighthouse disappeared. Now the drone overlooked endless forest, as though nothing had ever been there. Ryan checked the flight data. It never changed direction. It flew straight. Daniel looked toward the mysterious path. We're following it. Sophia hesitated. The journal warned people not to follow things they couldn't explain. Daniel nodded. And that's exactly why we have to. The team packed their equipment. Every step along the trail felt strangely familiar. The deeper they walked, the quieter the forest became. After nearly an hour, they found something standing beside the path. A weathered wooden sign. The paint had almost disappeared. Only 4 words remained. Return before your first step. Emma read the words twice. What does that even mean? Nobody knew. Mark suddenly stopped walking. Did anyone hear that? Everyone listened. Far behind them, footsteps. Slow, heavy. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Daniel turned around. The trail was empty. The footsteps continued. Always the same distance away. Never closer. Never farther. Ryan looked at the soft earth beneath the path. Fresh footprints were appearing. One after another, as if someone invisible was walking toward them. But the prints faced the wrong direction. Whoever, or whatever, was making them, was walking backward. The backward footprints stopped only a few meters from the team. No one stood there, only fresh impressions in the damp earth. Then even those began to fade. Not because the wind covered them, they simply disappeared. As though time had erased the last few seconds, Daniel forced himself to keep walking. No one breaks formation. Everyone stayed close together. The strange trail continued through thicker forest. The trees became enormous. Some trunks were wider than small houses. Their bark was covered with hundreds of deep scratches. Emma moved closer. They weren't random marks. Someone had carved dates into the trees. 1904, 1905, 1906, 1907, 1908, 1909, 1910, 1911. Ryan frowned. How can there be dates from the future? Daniel photographed the carvings. When he checked the image, the final date was gone. Only the older years remained. Sophia whispered, "It's changing." A faint sound echoed ahead. Not bells, not whispers. Laughter. Human laughter. For the first time since entering the forest, it sounded completely normal. The team hurried toward it. Beyond the trees stood a small meadow. 5 people sat around a campfire. They looked relieved to see strangers. One man stood and waved. "Thank God. We thought we were alone." Daniel smiled with relief. "We've been looking for other people." The man introduced himself. "My name is Thomas. This is my wife, Claire. Our friends Ethan, Lucy, and Ben." Their camping equipment looked almost new. The food was fresh. The fire burned brightly. Everything appeared ordinary. Daniel asked the obvious question. "When did you arrive?" Thomas laughed. "This morning. We crossed the bridge around 10. Emma slowly looked at Daniel. Their clocks had also stopped around 10. Sophia asked another question. "What year is it?" Thomas answered immediately. 1985. Nobody spoke. Claire noticed their expressions. "Why are you looking at us like that?" Sophia reached into her backpack. She removed a folder filled with newspaper clippings. Her hands trembled. She found one page, a photograph. 5 smiling campers. Thomas, Claire, Ethan, Lucy, Ben. The headline read, 5 hikers missing for 41 years. Emma quietly handed Thomas the newspaper. He stared at it, then laughed. "This isn't funny." Daniel showed him today's date on a working camera screen. Thomas's smile disappeared. Claire shook her head. "No. That's impossible. We left home yesterday." Ryan looked at Ethan. "You haven't aged." Ethan slowly touched his own face. "We've only been here a few hours." Nobody knew what to say. Then Ben suddenly looked toward the forest. His face turned white. "They found us." Daniel turned. Nothing was there. Ben stood so quickly that his chair fell over. "They're early." Claire grabbed his arm. "Who's early?" Ben didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, "Don't let them count you." The air became strangely cold. The campfire shrank without anyone touching it. One by one, the flames turned blue. Thomas backed away. "We have to hide." Daniel stepped forward. Hide from what? Thomas looked directly into his eyes. The people who look exactly like us. At that exact moment, Emma gasped. She pointed toward the far edge of the meadow. 6 figures stood silently between the trees. They weren't moving. They weren't speaking. But even from a distance, the team could see their faces. Every one of them looked exactly like someone standing in the meadow. Daniel was staring at another Daniel. Nobody breathed. The 6 figures remained perfectly still beneath the trees. Daniel stared at his own face. The other Daniel wore the same jacket, the same backpack, even the same camera hanging from his shoulder. Emma looked toward her double. Ryan, Sophia, and Mark each saw another version of themselves standing in silence. Only the 5 missing campers had no doubles. Thomas whispered, "They're here." His voice trembled. "They always come." Daniel called out, "Who are you?" The figures did not answer. Instead, every one of them smiled. Not a normal smile. A slow, unnatural smile that never reached their eyes. Emma raised her camera. The shutter clicked. The figures vanished. The photograph developed instantly on the camera screen. The meadow was empty. Only the documentary team stood there. No doubles. No campers. Nothing. Ryan looked around in panic. Where did everyone go? The 5 missing campers had disappeared as well. Their campfires still burned. Their bags still lay on the ground. But they were gone. Without a sound. Without footprints. Daniel picked up Thomas's backpack. Inside, he found a pocket watch. Unlike every other clock, it was still ticking. Sophia opened the watch. A folded piece of paper had been hidden beneath the cover. It contained a rough hand-drawn map. At its center was a single mark. A large circle labeled, "The heart below it." Someone had written, "If the tree is still alive, leave. If the tree is dead, it's already too late." Daniel folded the map. "We're going." The team followed the marked route. The forest changed again. The trees became darker. Their trunks twisted into impossible shapes. The air felt heavy. Every sound seemed distant. After hours of walking, they reached a vast clearing. Nobody spoke. An enormous tree stood in the center. It towered above everything else. Its branches stretched across the sky like giant black veins. Every leaf had long since fallen. The tree was completely dead. Around its roots lay hundreds, no, thousands of broken watches. Pocket watches, military watches, modern smart watches, children's watches, every style from every generation, all stopped at exactly 10:23. Ryan slowly knelt beside them. "There are too many." Daniel noticed something carved into the trunk. Hundreds of names. Some were almost unreadable. Others looked fresh. He recognized one immediately. Officer James Walker, the rescue officer from the radio. Another name, Michael Evans, the owner of the abandoned campsite. Then Emma froze. She pointed higher up the trunk. Fresh letters, still bleeding sap. 6 new names had appeared. Daniel Carter, Emma Brooks, Ryan Cole, Sophia Reed, Mark Ellis, and one more, a name none of them recognized. Before anyone could react, the ground beneath the tree vibrated. A low metallic sound echoed through the clearing. Not from above, from below. Sophia found an iron hatch hidden among the roots. Its surface was covered with rust. Someone had forced it open many years ago. Daniel pulled it wider. Cold air rushed upward. Stone steps disappeared into darkness. Ryan aimed his flashlight downward. The beam revealed walls lined with shelves. Hundreds of journals, boxes of photographs, scientific instruments, military equipment, old radio sets, typewriters, film reels, decades of abandoned expeditions. Someone had been studying the forest for generations. Daniel picked up the nearest journal. The cover read, "Project Kronos." He slowly opened the first page. The very first sentence read, "If you are reading this, we failed to stop it." Daniel carried the journal into the light. The cover was brittle. The pages were dry. Yet the ink looked as if it had been written that morning. Sophia brushed away the dust. There was no author's name. Only a date. October 12th, 1963. She opened the first page. "The forest is not haunted. It is repeating." Nobody spoke. Daniel continued reading. The journal described a government research team sent to investigate the disappearances. They had arrived expecting magnetic interference, hidden caves, underground gas, anything with a scientific explanation. Instead, they found something impossible. Time inside the forest did not flow in one direction. It folded. Moments from different years collided. People separated by decades could hear each other. Sometimes they could even see each other. That explained the radio voices. The abandoned campsite. The hikers from 1985. None of them were ghosts. They were trapped in different points of the same fracture. Ryan searched another shelf. He found aerial photographs. One image showed the forest in 1947, another from 1981, another from 2022. When he placed them side by side, every tree stood in exactly the same position. Not one had grown. Not one had fallen. The forest had remained unchanged for generations. Emma discovered dozens of cassette tapes. Mark found an old tape recorder that still worked. He inserted the first cassette. A man's voice filled the chamber. Calm. Professional. This is Dr. Samuel Hayes. Day 17. We believe the fracture is centered beneath the dead tree. Our instruments detect repeating time intervals. We are seeing events before they happen, and remembering days that have not yet occurred. The recording crackled, then continued. Yesterday, we met ourselves. Daniel slowly looked toward the tunnel entrance. No one said a word. The voice returned. We attempted to destroy the center. It made the fracture stronger. Another burst of static. Then the final sentence. If anyone reaches this chamber, do not let the cycle begin again. The tape clicked off. Sophia searched through another stack of documents. Near the bottom, she found a sealed envelope marked Final Report. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the research team standing beneath the giant tree. 7 people. But there was something strange. Each scientist appeared twice. One version looked young. The other looked decades older, standing beside themselves. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. They photographed the doubles. Ryan unfolded a detailed map of underground tunnels. Most passages had been crossed out in red ink. Only one route remained. At the end of it, someone had written, "The exit below that." A warning. Only one may leave before the fracture closes. Emma stared at the words. What does that mean? Nobody answered. The room suddenly shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The shelves rattled. Then every broken watch above them ticked once. For the first time. 1 second. Then they stopped again. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber. Mark switched on his recorder. The microphones captured something hidden beneath the sound. Voices. Hundreds of them. Repeating the same sentence. Not shouting. Not whispering. Simply repeating it together. Sophia increased the playback volume. The words became clear. It's opening again. The tunnel lights flickered. A cold wind rushed through the chamber. Daniel turned toward the staircase. Someone was standing at the top. The old man with the blue lantern. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood dozens of silent people. Every one of them carried a lantern. And every face belonged to someone listed in the missing person files. The old man raised his lantern. The blue light spread across the chamber. Every missing person behind him remained perfectly still. No one blinked. No one spoke. They simply watched. Daniel stepped forward. Who are you? The old man answered without hesitation. My name is William Ashcroft. Sophia's eyes widened. She searched through the documents scattered across the table. A faded photograph slipped from one of the folders. It showed a rescue team standing beside the wooden bridge. One man carried a lantern. The caption underneath read, William Ashcroft, lead ranger, missing since 1963. Daniel slowly lowered the photograph. You've been here all this time. William nodded. For me, it has only been 3 days. Silence filled the chamber. William looked at every member of the team. I tried to leave. The forest wouldn't let me, Ryan asked. Why not? William looked toward the dead tree above them. Because someone must always stay. No one understood. William walked deeper into the chamber. He stopped beside an enormous steel mechanism built into the rock. Old cables disappeared into the walls. Broken clocks hung from its frame. A single brass lever stood in the center. Daniel frowned. What is this? The anchor. William answered quietly. It keeps the fracture contained. Sophia looked through the research notes. She found a sketch of the same machine. One sentence had been circled over and over. The anchor requires a keeper, Emma whispered. What happens if no one stays? William closed his eyes. The fracture expands. Every year. Every decade. Until there is no outside left. The ground trembled again. Cracks spread across the stone floor. Blue light leaked through them. The watches hanging on the walls all began ticking together. Not slowly, wildly, faster and faster. Mark looked toward the tunnel. It's collapsing. William nodded. The cycle is restarting. He turned to Daniel. You still have a choice. Daniel looked at his team. We're leaving together. William shook his head. You can't. He handed Daniel a weathered notebook. Inside were hundreds of names. Every missing person who had entered the forest. The final page was blank. Waiting. William smiled sadly. I've been waiting 63 years. For someone else to arrive. Daniel understood. Someone had always remained behind. That was why the forest never emptied. That was why the voices continued. Emma stepped forward. There has to be another way. William looked at her. If there was, I would already be home. The ceiling cracked open. Roots burst through the stone. Blue light flooded the chamber. The steel anchor screamed as metal twisted apart. William pulled the brass lever. The machine roared to life. A hidden passage opened behind the team. Cold daylight poured inside. The exit, William said calmly. It won't stay open. Daniel refused to move. William smiled. You came here looking for the truth. You found it. Now make sure the world knows. Ryan grabbed Daniel's shoulder. We have to go. The chamber shook violently. Shelves collapsed. Journals scattered across the floor. Emma looked back one last time. William stood beside the anchor. The missing people slowly gathered around him, one by one. They lifted their blue lanterns, not as prisoners, but as guardians. Daniel realized the terrifying truth. None of them had been trying to escape anymore. They had been protecting everyone outside. The team ran through the passage. Behind them, William's final words echoed through the tunnel. Whatever you hear, never come back. The passage began to collapse. Daniel turned for one last look. William pulled the lever completely down. The chamber disappeared beneath falling stone. The doorway slammed shut. The forest became silent once again. But as the team reached the old wooden bridge, Daniel looked down at his frozen watch. For the first time since entering the forest, the second hand moved. 1 second forward, then another. Time had finally started again. The team crossed the old wooden bridge without speaking. The moment their boots touched the road, every phone vibrated. Every watch began running normally. The radio filled with ordinary static. Birds sang. The wind returned. It felt as though the world had started breathing again. Daniel looked back. Black Hollow Forest stood exactly where it had always been. Quiet, motionless, almost ordinary. Ryan laughed nervously. We made it. No one answered. Something felt wrong. The road was wider than before. The bridge looked newer. Even the warning sign at the entrance had disappeared. Emma checked the recording time on her camera. She frowned. The footage is corrupted. Nearly every clip inside the forest had vanished. Only a few short fragments remained. The frozen clocks, the abandoned village, the dead tree. Nothing else. Daniel started the van. The engine worked immediately. After 20 minutes, they reached the nearest town. Everything looked unfamiliar. The streets had changed. Old buildings were gone. Modern glass towers stood where empty fields had been. Ryan stared through the windshield. I don't remember any of this. Daniel assumed they had taken a different road. Then they stopped at a gas station. The young cashier smiled politely. Can I help you? Daniel asked for today's newspaper. The cashier handed it over. Daniel unfolded the front page. His hands began to shake. The date was impossible. 43 years had passed. No one spoke. Emma whispered, No. Ryan grabbed another newspaper. The date was the same. Sophia searched her phone. Every news website confirmed it. The world had moved forward. They had not. Mark tried calling his wife. The number no longer existed. Emma searched for her parents. Both had died years earlier. Ryan found his own name in an online archive, listed among people officially declared dead decades ago. Daniel drove to his old home. A different family lived there. They had never heard his name. Sophia visited the university where she had worked. Her office no longer existed. Her research had been archived under historical material. The team slowly understood the truth. Inside the forest, they had experienced only 3 days. Outside, almost half a century had passed. News channels covered their return. Scientists examined their blood. Doctors compared old fingerprints. DNA confirmed the impossible. They had not aged. Authorities asked the same question again and again. Where have you been? No answer sounded believable. No government report mentioned Black Hollow Forest. Every official map showed empty wilderness. The abandoned village did not exist. The bridge did not exist. Even the missing person records had quietly disappeared from public databases. It was as though history itself had rewritten the evidence. Only Daniel refused to let the story die. Months later, the recovered footage was assembled into a documentary. Most of it was damaged. Only fragments remained. The frozen watches, the strange village, the dead tree, the blue lantern, nothing that proved the impossible. The documentary premiered anyway. Critics called it fiction. Audiences argued online. Some believed every word. Most dismissed it as clever editing. Late one night, after the final version was completed, Daniel watched the master recording alone. The last frame should have faded to black. Instead, a few seconds of unknown footage appeared. It had never been filmed by anyone on the team. The image showed the entrance to the underground chamber. The blue lantern still burned. William Ashcroft stood beside the anchor. He looked directly into the camera. Slowly, he smiled. Then he stepped aside. A narrow passage opened behind him, from the darkness. A child walked into view. It was the same child whose voice had spoken through the radio. The child looked into the camera and quietly said, "You left when it was your turn." Then the child tilted their head. But someone else has already crossed the bridge. The screen filled with heavy static. One final sound echoed through the speakers. A church bell. 1, 2, 3. The video ended. 6 months later, a family of 4 vanished while hiking in a forest that no official map claimed existed. Their watches were all found beside an old wooden bridge. Every one of them had stopped at exactly 10:23.